Pastor Mike, good afternoon. Today we're talking about Kroger, the chance that was, the chance that appears now to have gone. It was back in 1982 that BP drilled an exploration well off the Isle of Man. They decided not to progress. In 2014, Kroger Limited was founded, and in 2017 was awarded a production license. As it is, as of last Friday, it appears it's all over. And with me today throughout the whole hour is Chris Robertshaw, former Minister for Policy and Reform, former MHK and Kroger shareholder. So, Chris, what's the truth? What's happening? What's the situation?
Good morning, Andy. Thanks for having me on. And do bear with me because there's quite a lot to get through, rather a lot. Can I just re-emphasise the point that I'm speaking as an ex-politician and a shareholder of Kroger. I am not Kroger's specific spokesman as such. But what I promise your listeners is that everything I say will be accurate and factual. And it's about time, frankly, Andy, that the truth came out. Can I start off by saying how appalled I was by the minister's comments this morning? Incredibly misleading. And all I can conclude is that as a new minister, she's been very, very badly informed by her department, or she knows the truth and has chosen not to promulgate it to the public. Either way, I don't know which way it is. I guess it's probably more the former, that the department haven't told her the full facts. And if that's the case, then it's clearly, yet again, a situation where a department of government is not speaking the truth to the people of the Isle of Man, which is absolutely disgraceful. There are three fundamental points I want to raise this morning, but before I do, I just want to, if I may, just touch on a few points of significant relevance. And it's been open season for a lot of deeply ill-informed comments over the years, and I want to explain why Kroger has never, as it were, stepped into the public arena and argued its case. And I think it can be best encapsulated by the words that Richard Hubbard, the CEO of Kroger, included in his letter to members before Keys last week. And he wrote, "Kroger has taken the view today that it would have been improper as the chosen government licensee to express its deep concerns from any public platform, always of the belief that reasonable agreement could and should be found." In other words, where you've got a situation where you've got a government as licensor and a company as a licensee, a professional company must conduct itself, as it were, directly with government and not try to take a platform in the public and start disagreeing with its licensor. Well, of course, we've passed that situation now, so now the public can hear the truth. And the few points I want to make before I go any further is how Kroger started, and I'll do this as quickly as I can. But DOI, about a decade ago, went out to the major oil and gas companies trying to encourage them to come and find out whether the Isle of Man has the asset it believes is there.
It was a DOI initiative.
Yes, it was. It was a DOI. And the majors turned them down. So at that point, DOI were then in a position, okay, well, what do we do? So I don't know who it was, but came up with the idea that maybe we can encourage interest on the island by a local company. And out of all of this, Kroger was actually formed. So people should be aware there isn't a big major out there waiting to enact this program. It doesn't exist. There's been an awful lot of badly informed information put out there by a variety of people about how inappropriate Kroger is. Well, to those people I say, and to everybody, I say that Kroger went through a full due diligence program with the NSTA and fully passed.
NSTA is?
Oh, I beg your pardon, the North Sea Transitionary Authority, probably the most highly respected oil and gas offshore regulator in the world, probably. Anyway, Kroger passed and was loaded onto all their systems. awaiting the day that Crogger could start to find out whether we have the commercial gas levels that Crogger believe exist. DOI has throughout this whole process been utterly, on its part, preoccupied with the idea that the 3D seismic test should happen first. I think it's important to say that when the Chief Minister was for a short time the Minister of DOI, he established a consultancy company to come in to see whether there should be this preoccupation with the 3D seismic happening first. And the advice PRS, that was the government-appointed consultant, said was no, Crogger is right, it should be doing the appraisal well first. So that, as it were, deals with that. There's another one, and I think Chris Thomas has been really keen to float this. I think probably out of embarrassment that he mishandled the whole situation while he was DOI Minister, but he keeps promulgating in public that don't worry, there's plenty of time to do this and we can go and find somebody else. Well, I've just explained to you that the majors didn't want to know. And then there's the issue of what's called the Ramside processing plant in the UK. Now, the life of that plant will expire, and it will depend upon the degree to which gas is flowing into it. And out with the Crogger development, the likelihood is that the Ramside processing plant, I think somewhere north of Barrow-in-Furness, I don't know, will cease to function. So the clock is absolutely ticking anyway for the Isle of Man. It can't possibly, in any future arrangement, produce a processing plant on the island. It's out of the question. So if I can now turn to the three roadblocks that have consistently and persistently been in Crogger's way, which is why it's never been able to act, which is why the extensions kept having to be placed in to keep the whole the project going. And those three roadblocks are completely of the DOI's making. And if I can just draw a simple analogy here, it's like there's one road to a town through a pass, and it's closed 3 times with barriers, and yet the traveller is somehow expected to get to the town at the other side. It is impossible unless those barriers, which have been put up now back to the DOI, unless they're removed, and the DOI have absolutely refused to do this. And I hope that my explanation of these road barriers is sufficiently articulate to have people understand how Crogger has been placed in such an impossible position. And it tried to articulate that in this letter to the members on Monday night prior to Keys last week. The first one is compensation, and I'm not sure who's saying that Crogger has refused to agree compensation with Ørsted, and we'll call it Ørsted. There's a local name for the company, but everybody knows the wind farm regime as Ørsted, so if I may, I'll use that reference. Because Ørsted was on the field first, it became as it were, the landlord and had sort of senior rights, as it were, to Crogger's position. And that included the need for the parties to agree compensation should there be any conflict in interest between Crogger and Ørsted. I think it's pretty straightforward, that. However, DOI have insisted that process of compensation lies entirely in the hands of Ørsted. Crogger, for its part, has said no. It believes absolutely that the DOI should be applying best practice with regard to how compensation works. And if I may, I'll just refer to what proper or best practice compensation is. And I again refer to the letter that the MHKs received last week. And it reads as follows: the correct form of action between two parties working on overlapping fields is covered under best practice guidance as described in the website gov.uk, the Crown Estate's interest, the North Sea Transitionary Authority, again, the body we referred to earlier. Rather, obviously, best practice provides for any compensation to be determined by an independent valuer. Well, what the DOI wholly unreasonably expect Crogger to do is to enter into a compensation agreement with Ørsted defining whether or not there's agreement and how much it should be and when it should be paid. Well, of course, that and that alone would deny Crogger the opportunity to achieve appropriate levels of investment. It's self-evident to anybody who's got a remotely commercial head that brings it to an end. That's the first roadblock. Okay. The second roadblock is regulation, drilling regulations and legislation. Now, your listeners should understand that it is totally impossible for Crogger to move forward unless there's a full set of drilling regulations and appropriate legislation in place. Crogger have been trying to, this is just mind-blowing. Crogger have been trying to get the Isle of Man government to put these drilling regulations and legislation in place for nearly, I'm exaggerating, six to 7 years. 6 to 7 years in total, and it still hasn't happened. And this nonsense that one heard from Michelle Haywood, who must have been ill-briefed on this, talking about, well, Crogger should have done this, that and the other. Well, it can't, because her department has not put the appropriate regulations in place. It's, again, no investor would touch a project like this unless the company concerned had the appropriate drilling regulations and legislations in place.
So who's deciding that? And bearing in mind, I'm trying to think, we've had 2016 was Phil Gorn, then there was Ray Harmer, Tim Baker, Tim Crookall the first time, Chris Thomas. As you say, Mr. Cannon did it for a short time, Tim Crookall back in, and then Michelle Haywood. Is it politicians or is it civil servants if these rules and regulations haven't appeared?
Well, it's both, but primarily it's the DOI, and here I'm going to offer you my subjective opinion. And it's very simple, that DOI have been determined that this would not go ahead. And it's self-evident, not by my subjective opinion, but by the actions they have not taken to remove the roadblocks. And there's a third one. And the third one is all about timing. And the timing that Crogger are required to enter into to achieve both the appraisal well and the 3D seismic is ridiculously tight when compared to Ørsted's requirements. So at one end, at the far end if you like, you have Ørsted saying it wants a whole range of information from Crogger by December of 26. Crogger cannot provide that information unless it achieves its 3D seismic and its appraisal well. And it cannot go ahead with these until such time as government produces the regulations and legislation. And then on top of, even if that could be brought in place within a year, say 15 months at the very best, and remember Crogger's been waiting now for 6+ years for them to do anything, that the Crogger then has to go through a whole complex process which takes about 6 to 9 months, closer to 9 months, to get to a position where it can start enacting on those regulations. That leaves it a few weeks at the end. And of course, again, you're in a position where Crogger is placed in a totally impossible position. So I'm beyond disgusted over all of this. Excuse me. Because Crogger has two interests here. It has the interests of a business trying to deliver for its shareholders, but primarily this is a huge national asset potentially that Crogger really wants to realise for the Isle of Man, because any person who really understands the government's accounting position, it's deteriorating. We have been living off our reserves now for some considerable time, and the forecast is will carry on up to and beyond 2030, which means that the Isle of Man government in its bloated form has effectively been running the Isle of Man down by using its reserves and pretending that all is well. It's running the NI fund down. It's overcharging young people and lower earners. And so government is failing in its duty. And there are many of us who want to see this succeed so that it, as it were, fills the gap, deals with all, and gives us a decade to sort ourselves out so that we're fair to the following generations.
I mean, you've been in business for several decades now, and in business, when two parties don't agree, either they get together in a dark room and chat the whole thing out, or somebody from outside, a mediator, bangs their heads together and a compromise is reached. So the public will be asking, if there is a national asset sitting off Mackord, if it potentially could plug a big hole in our finances, and a Manx company wants to exploit it, and the government is standing in the way, the public will ask why this, and why it's been allowed to happen and continue.
Absolutely, and Crogger's view is that the right way to deal with this, because this is a matter of huge interest to the public of the Isle of Man. It should be asked in some sort of really professional poll, does it want to see this asset realised or not? And if the answer is no, that's fine. If it's yes, I still believe there's a way forward, which I'm happy to discuss with you if you wish. If the people don't want it, that's fine. What should not be the case, and what is too often the case, is that senior officers in departments rule the roost, decide what they want to do and what they don't want to do. There's almost a sort of contempt in some respects for the political process now, and so many of our ministers are sort of, as it were, inexperienced in commercial matters and other areas. But I do believe that people should be much more involved in these big decisions, because this is a big decision, and so far they've been held in contempt by the DOI, and one can evidence that by the minister misleading the public this morning, either intentionally or unintentionally. That's a matter for debate, but by goodness me, she did.
Okay, is COVID any to blame for any of it?
COVID, in terms of the cost to the government,
and the fact that it slowed everything down for near on a couple of years. Everybody had an excuse not to do something during COVID.
Okay, well let's say that there's some degree of truth in that, but what's completely lacking either side of COVID is goodwill on the part of DOI to do the right thing prior to and running up to COVID, and thereafter afterwards. That is very self-evident to anybody who wants to examine this, and I hope one day that this matter will be examined thoroughly, because this is just another occasion where Department of Government have got something really big and important totally wrong.
Okay, has any public money been invested in this by the government?
Crogger's position throughout, I mean, I had to laugh. I mean, one could almost end in hysterics when you hear the minister saying that her role was to protect the taxpayer. Well, for goodness sake, Crogger has made it abundantly clear right the way through that it considers the whole process to be a risk matter for private investors. And if successful, then the taxpayer gains hugely. The people of the Isle of Man gain hugely. If it's a fail, and it's a 50-50 chance that it could, then the only losers are the investors, not the taxpayer. So again, another example of, I'm not sure she's had any commercial experience, otherwise she wouldn't have said that.
Has there ever been a politician who's come out and voiced approval and support for Crogger? Any prominent politician who's come out? Because politicians have always seemed to hedge their bets, full of ifs, buts and maybes about whether it would happen.
Well, I think there's one or two who've expressed support. I mean, I wouldn't want to name them because I wouldn't want to miss anybody off who has been supportive. I know that there were 8 politicians who wanted that debate, which should have happened in Keys last Tuesday. So there must be support there, but
okay.
There's something terribly naive about our current house, because
just got a message in from Dave, who just said, could you ask Chris Robertshaw, is this Manx crabs? Is somebody somewhere? Is it good old-fashioned envy? The fact that, I mean, let's face it, commercial investors will be looking for a return. There is a national asset, but there's a possible return there. Does somebody somewhere not like the idea of a Manx company being successful with this?
I think I don't think that's the government's attitude. I think they're maniacal at the moment in their pursuit of net zero, and sort of zealot in that approach, and see anything contrary to that, in their view, as utterly wrong. So it's utter naivety, because, I mean, net zero now has reached its peak, and more people are beginning to understand that transition should be handled in a much more sophisticated way than it has currently been the case of, this sort of over-enthusiastic rush to renewables, which are, as it were, not always there. We have to find renewables. We have to find non-fossil fuel energy from sources which are permanently there. And right now, the whole concept of wind farms is wholly intermittent, and as thus causes additional costs born out of the fact that you have to replicate that energy supply when the wind farms aren't there. And of course, we're also recognising the fact now, increasingly understanding, the finance houses that come in behind wind farms are increasingly understanding that the period within which they can make a return for their finance is reducing right down, such that they're pulling out. And in fact, I think many of your listeners will already know that Ørsted have pulled out of a huge field that they got the license for, just off East Anglia, and the share prices have reduced because there's, as it were, the reality's dawning on people. No, this isn't necessarily the way to get to net zero or close to it, and yet that's the route we seem to be pursuing. I think DOI, from everything I've said, I think people will perhaps appreciate that DOI are of that sort of ideological mind, and of, as it were, are worshipping at the altar of Ørsted. I would put it to the general public that they've made a terrible mistake.
Would you, is there any part of you that thinks that the Ørsted Mannin wind farm won't happen?
I think for the reason I've just described, it's unlikely as a general point about how you finance these things, because the bigger the wind farms, the more maintenance costs are involved, and investors are seeing the life of these wind turbines reducing, as it were, constantly squeezing the profitability. But you have to see to answer your question in a slightly different way. You've got to appreciate that the Crogga, the Ørsted field, is actually would be a UK wind farm in Isle of Man waters, and that before it could go ahead, it would have to have been granted a contract for difference from the UK government, which is a very significant form of subsidy. And wherever that's, to my knowledge, and I could be on this point, I could be wrong, I'm not aware that the Isle of Man, the UK government, has permitted this sort of subsidy outside its own territorial waters thus far. So there's the question mark: would they do that in the first place? Would they do it for somewhere that's not in their territorial waters, that is owned by the Labour, the Socialists, could consider to be let's be blunt, they would consider it a tax haven to some degree. And why would a socialist government subsidise a wind farm in a tax haven? But you've also got to consider something else as well, and that is that there's a put and take for the wind farm companies when they're entering into these rounds, where the bidding rounds they're called, where there's a strike price. And the point is that it's a put and take where the wind farm company provide the UK government with, as it were, value based on the fact that company is leasing land from the UK government. So the government get that in with one hand and give the subsidy out with the other. But of course that can't apply here for very obvious reasons.
And which government department will be negotiating with the Labour government? Which would it be? DOI?
Oh, God forbid! I hope not. I don't know how it would work.
Okay, all right. We've got lots of calls waiting to come on now. Howard's first with us today. Hi, Howard. You're live with Chris Robertshaw.
Good afternoon, Andy. Good afternoon, Chris.
Hi. Hi.
It's the sorriest day of my life, and I'm an old gentleman now, that the Crogger farm, and I remember the exploration there by various companies, and I can remember the words that there is oil and gas there, but at the time the price was not suitable, and they sort of walked away and left it, but now Crogger have come back and the prices have obviously risen, the demand has risen, and the need has risen, which is very important because the need is where these wind farms and the solar panels fall down because they cannot produce energy virtually 24/7. And this is where fossil fuels come into their own. This is with the likes of our power station down here. We could get the gas then at a much cheaper rate by it going off the island and coming back at a different price. We could cut the electricity charges and have a guaranteed electrical supply. They're talking about expanding to another 15,000 people, with all that implies there, with the schools and the hospitals and everything. But when the wind farms, as they're talking about, are the hospitals, old folks' homes, and everything else is on 24/7, are they going to have diesel generators fitted to supply electricity to them?
Okay, all right, Howard. Well, thanks for that. We've got that question noted down. I just want to take a quick call from Julian, and then we'll get back to Chris Robertshaw. Julian.
Hi, Andy, and hello, Chris.
Hi, Julian.
Hi, Chris. Just a couple of quick ones here. Kroger, they've acquired a UK licence, even though it's called Ronaldsway Gasfield, near to Blackpool. And that was granted by the North Sea Transition Authority after only 3 months of due diligence, their licence. Whereas here, it's taken 6 years and 4 extensions. But I noticed back in '95, 3 Manx drilling licenses were granted to companies Marathon, Elf and BP. And that was under the existing regulations that were on the Isle of Man. So have these regulations on the island not been updated because some in the government feel that they're bound by the 2016 Paris Climate Agreement and the Isle of Man's own climate emergency declaration? And the other part of my question is, the Green Party have said that they're relieved at the collapse of the Kroger gas project. So if it's likely that the financial implication of this collapse is the loss of around £3,000 million to the Isle of Man Treasury, is the alternative Ørsted more Mannin, aside from the fact that Ørsted have lost 1/6, the share value is 1/6 of what it was recently. And as far as I can see from an FOI, the seabed option fee has been $8,500 a year rather than the usual $166 million that Ørsted pays to the Crown Estate.
Okay.
So, so you've got sacrifice of $3,000 million. What's in it for us if we go down the Green Party's route?
Okay, Chris Robertshaw.
Okay, well, first of all, let me deal with gas prices that your previous caller, and I'm sure many listeners already understand that Kroger had entered into an understanding with government that should it be successful, there's 50-50 chance of whether the gas comes out commercially, then it would provide very attractive gas prices to the Isle of Man for a very, very significant period, which would mean that our electricity prices were under total control for a long time ahead. And also gas consumers directly, industry, domestic, etc., would also be in the same position. Huge advantage to the Isle of Man in what is now becoming very, very unsettled environment in the world around us, both in economics and politics, etc. turning to your point about regulations, just remind those who don't know this that in 1995, when the Isle of Man government was dealing with Horizon and ELF, it took them somewhere between 25 minutes and 40 minutes in Tynwald to get the regs through by pointing to the UK regulations and saying, you see those regulations, they will be used in our territorial waters, and the UK overseeing regulator will also apply, and all the operators who were working for these two companies will also have to apply. Now, those must exist somewhere, but obviously the whole world of oil and gas has become much more sophisticated, and therefore the regulations have equally become more sophisticated. But let me just ask you this. Is there any comparison between 40 minutes in Tynwald and 6.5 years and still no proper progress? Is that, if anything is that not the most eloquent indication that the DOI and the Isle of Man government have no wish to move forward on this?
Why? Why do you perceive that there's that big roadblock?
Well, I think that there's various levels to this. The first one is, I believe that the senior officers in DOI think they can do what they want and hold politicians who challenge them in contempt. There's that.
But that will surprise many voters, many constituents, many lay people, that publicly elected officials could be roughshod over by civil servants.
Yes, because the officers concerned think that their view is more informed and they're controlling. I don't want to go here now because it's such a big subject, but I recognised this back in 2015 and said the government needs to be reformed. I still passionately believe that's the case. Until we do that, and I hope that this becomes a debating point for the next election, that really voters must wonder what on earth they're voting for, because the connection between the will of the people and the direction the government is going is a divorce, effectively, and the departments are going in the directions that they want to go. I have a number of very clear ideas as to how we can start running a democracy again, because right now it isn't. We've got a bloated government that doesn't listen to the people, that's spending money like there's no tomorrow and destroying the future of our children and grandchildren, and it's a downright disgrace.
Okay, let's Eddie, you're live with Chris Robertshaw. Hi, Eddie.
Hiya, you all right?
Good.
I'm a man of sort of use my common sense whenever I can, and it strikes me on one side I've got what's her name, Port St Mary.
Michelle Hayward.
Michelle Hayward, yeah.
Michelle. We've got Michelle Hayward saying one thing and Chris saying another. Now, somewhere along the line, one of them is not telling the truth. Judging by the last 2.5 years of this government, who are clear and transparent, laugh, I would love to see a proper inquiry here, because there's something drastic going wrong. It should be a police inquiry even. It is affecting, like your words just a few moments ago. This is the Isle of Man's future you're talking about here, and it's just so corrupt everything at the moment.
Okay, well, I don't think it's hardly a criminal matter, but we're talking about the future, and again, how much? Because the public heard various telephone numbers, Chris, about how much was going to be raised. Where would the revenue have come from?
Well, the right at the very beginning, Crogger laid out its position, and there was recognition by government, yes, that the tax recovery, etc., was appropriate and fair, and it would result in something, given that the gas comes out at the right pressure. It would result in over the life of the field, it would produce £2.6 billion, which would deal with all our problems now. This business about increasing the population and by whatever it was, 12,000 or something. What would really make the Isle of Man tick would be to make absolutely sure we had a wonderful education system and a wonderful health service, because the island's a fabulous place. And in order to do this, we need to overcome this overspending psychology that currently exists in government. And the influx of those monies over a decade plus would allow the Isle of Man to sort itself out. So the way forward is to get that to happen, and then to reform government so it's a government for the people again, rather than a government for the senior bureaucrats who've sort of somehow taken over. What we're importing is more and more of the UK's way of government detaching itself from the will of the people. I'm assuming that the will of the people is that they want to find out whether that asset is there, and that if it's there, do they want to recover it? I believe they do. But has anybody asked them?
Okay, just back to specifics. 2.6 billion. What point do the revenues accrue? Where is there a levy whereby it comes back to the Treasury?
There'll be a slight lag at the beginning, but how it actually works is a bit complex on the radio to try and explain. But it starts to flow pretty quickly, and it just keeps going, depending on the recovery rate from the field, and could sort so much out for us.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Final word, Eddie.
Yeah, I agree totally. Let's find out if we've got the asset there. Let's just do it. What Chris was saying then, the majority of the people out here, according to what the people I ask, all want the exploration to go ahead as fast as possible and find out yes or no. But I still think there should be an inquiry as to regards why the government are putting all these hurdles in front, because I totally agree with he's had loads of roadblocks.
Okay, appreciate that, Eddie. Thanks for that.
Andy, can I just say something here? And I'm speaking now as an individual who's been involved in politics and has followed very closely Crogger's mindset all the way through this. Now, to repeat what I think I said earlier on, that Crogger has a dual interest in supporting its shareholders and doing the right thing for the Isle of Man. And even though we're in a completely no-go situation now, my belief is that if government was willing to put aside its extraordinary prejudices and determination this shouldn't happen, and got engaged with the principal, Richard Hubbard here, I believe that Crogger might very well be willing, as it were, to reenact this existing licence offered to it by government, and then seek a medium-sized company who could then have that licence, as it were, farmed out to them through Crogger, and give the Isle of Man a chance, so that it could be. You get away from this Crogger thing that so many people have the wrong idea over, because what matters here really is the future of the Isle of Man, and Crogger knows that and wants to see things happen. But if government will consider this, it absolutely has to be willing to remove these roadblocks, because there have been roadblocks put in the way of Crogger, and unless they're removed, there'll be roadblocks in front of another medium-sized company who would act as the senior partner, and nothing would happen.
And when you say medium-sized company, like who?
Well, I don't know the names of them, but Richard Hubbard knows the names of them. DOI, obviously, going back, completely failed to get majors in. So Richard's very, very fond of the Isle of Man. He's earned nothing over the recent years trying to make this happen. His family are linked to the Kinraids in Laxey, so he cares hugely about the Isle of Man and knows all about the field. So it's important that Crogger remain involved, but he has connections all over the sector. There was a point earlier on, I think I missed an answer on, and that was the position with regard to a field closer to Blackpool, Ronaldsway. From Crogger's perspective, that was intimately linked with Crogger, so that the economies of scale occurred, that one was done and then the other. Well, of course, when Crogger goes down, I presume, from what I know, that will mean that Ronaldsway one also falls down.
Is it true that Manx Utilities have stepped in and stopped Crogger drilling for gas? What part do Manx Utilities play in this?
The short answer to that is I don't know, and I don't think so. But what I would say, and I don't know where these comments will resonate with other people, but MU have consistently shown an absolute determination to have a monopoly control on everything, effectively, and I think that over-influences not with Croggan per se, but with other people trying to bring innovative ideas into the island to produce electricity. So I have a prejudice towards MU in the sense that if it's not MU, it's not going to happen. I hope that answers the question to some degree.
Okay, back with Chris Robertshaw in just a few moments' time. And I'll warn you now, my question is going to be, is there any way back from this?
We are ready to go at B&B Furniture with a wide range of manager specials throughout the store. If it says I'm ready to go, then it is ready to go. Priced in-store for immediate delivery and no long wait for stock to arrive onto the island. Get the furniture you're longing for with no wait, no deposit required and 0% finance available when you get ready to go at B&B Furniture. It's all here under one roof at the B&B Furniture 3-story showroom in Snugborough.
B&B Furniture. When you need a fitting memorial or headstone for a loved one, contact Manx Memorials in Peel. This long-standing family-run Manx company offer a wide range of granite and marble headstones and memorials, along with an island-wide inscription and renovation service. Manx Memorials skilled professionals will take the time to help you choose a suitable memorial, and we're proud to say we'll beat other local quotes. Call 843-861 or email matthew@manxmemorials.co.uk.
I began to struggle with the stairs, but I didn't want to leave our family home. So my daughter told me about Acorn Stair Lifts and their new showroom in Douglas. I was able to try the stair lifts and find the right one for me and the home I love. They were so friendly. The whole process was hassle-free and they offered the whole package from installation to servicing. Choose the island's first choice for stair lifts. Acorn Stair Lifts, South Quay, Douglas.
Call Acorn Stair Lifts now on 672 414 or call into our Douglas showroom.
Manx Radio is the #1 choice of listeners aged over 35 on the Isle of Man. We lead the way in connecting brands with Manx Radio's engaged and loyal audience. And our breakfast show attracts 71% more listeners than any other station. So if you want to boost your brand with tailored advertising that really works, then call 682 620 or email sales@manxradio.com. Help your business reach new heights today with Manx Radio.
It's another Radio Caroline North broadcast this weekend, live from the radio ship Ross Revenge. Enter our competition this month and you could win one of 3 Pure Roland Connect Plus all-in-one internet radios, also featuring Bluetooth, DAB+, and FM. Our broadcast sponsor is Turton Tower Woodland Cafe, and it all starts this Saturday morning at 10, straight after Carnaby Street. Online, on DAB and 1368 AM. Radio Caroline North.
The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
And Chris Robertshaw is on today, former MHK minister, a Kroger shareholder at the moment. As he's mentioned, he's not representing Kroger per se, but we are where we are today. I'm going to ask you that question in just a moment, Chris. First of all, Andrew's with us. Andrew, you're live with Chris Robertshaw.
Hi, good day to you, Chris and Andy and listeners. Please, Chris, with a private company or any company, the company has an obligation every year to file an annual return at the registry, irrespective of what it's doing, and to pay the annual return fee. So please, can you explain to our listeners how much the license fees are for the block, and when will they be paid? And even, does the company, to your knowledge, even have the money to pay them, or is it feasibly insolvent?
Well, I'm not in a position to act decisively in my answer to you because, of course, I'm not, as it were, a servant of the company or the board as such. All I can say to you is that I'm perfectly happy to come back on a future Mannin Line programme with Andy, just to ring in myself, to explain in more detail what the situation is there. But I'm very much aware how hard the directors of Kroger have, how much effort they've put into to ensure that Kroger remained solvent despite all that has been put against them to inhibit their success. And I commend them for their actions.
Okay. Thanks, Andrew. I just wanted to get that there, and that was partly you talked earlier on about the fact that, in effect, Kroger haven't said much since the start of this. They've kept their powder dry, and because of respecting what the government said, they've not said much. Do you think and so people have got the wrong idea about lots and lots of things, about the fact that funds were given back to shareholders and various other things. There was a dispute with one of the directors. Do you think, in hindsight, Kroger should have been a bit more open with the public?
No, I think it acted correctly. The problem is that the government haven't acted fair and reasonably, and it would be quite. I mean, in a commercial world where you're a licensee to the licensor, then your engagement is in private between the two parties. It's not right for the licensee to then go out and say, well, they're not treating us properly. The reasonable assumption that Kroger always had was that it would expect proper and appropriate treatment from the government and never got it. And on the other side, I think the DOI and government generally has taken advantage of the fact, huge advantage, and those against the concept of getting gas have used Kroger's correct reticence not to engage in public debate and discussion as an opportunity to mislead the public, and that's what's happened.
Chris Robertshaw, is there a way back for the Kroger gas field?
Well, I refer back to a comment I raised before. I believe there is, and I think it's a step-by-step process. First of all, the government have got to ask the general public, do they want it to happen or not? In other words, let's be a democracy again. Do the public want this to happen or not? Do they want to see if that asset is there, and do they want it recovered? If the answer is yes, then I believe it must be possible, because I know the directors of Kroger well enough to know that they care hugely about the Isle of Man, and they would assist at using Kroger to facilitate that to happen if it is at all possible. The big but is that DOI, the government, must absolutely change their position and their determination to place endless roadblocks in the way, because if they are in the way for a senior partner, shall we say, to Kroger, then nothing will happen. So it's about time our political body grew up and showed some courage and some confidence on the basis that the people of the Isle of Man were saying, for goodness sake, act.
Pat dropped a note in, Pat on 223. Thank you, Pat. What's to stop one of the big companies from extracting gas from our territory through directional drilling and not needing Isle of Man approval? Directional drilling is being used worldwide to steal assets from other companies. Are you aware of this?
Yes, I am. I can't give you a definitive answer there. It's questionable. It's a good point.
Okay, so I'll play devil's advocate for the last minute, and this is, if you were the Department of Infrastructure and you'd heard what Chris Robertshaw said today, what would their response be, do you think?
Well, if they continue, I think they'll continue to bluff their way through this. I think we're almost, the Isle of Man's becoming almost leaderless now in a political sense. I've been around an awful long time, and I remember the quality of MHKs 30, 40 years ago, how they were so experienced in life and were fighting for the greater good of the Isle of Man. What seems to be happening now is a preoccupation with, am I going to get re-elected, and am I going to operate according to that with a short-term agenda? I just hope that we have some politicians there who'll stand up to be counted and say, let the people speak. I mean, I'm a great believer in the referendum, but we can't put all that machinery together immediately, because if it's going to have a chance of succeeding, it needs to happen quickly.
by nature, Chris, are you an optimist?
Hope is the issue, and I hope that sense is seen over this. If you lose hope, you lose everything, don't you?
Okay. Thanks for being with us today, Chris. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
On Wednesday, we're live at QE2 High School. See what the students have to say. This coming Friday, the Chief Minister's on. Alfred Canham, no doubt, will come to the subject of Kroger and the gas field again. You want to get in touch, by the way, leave a message on the answer phone 682-631 or email manninline@manxradio.com. Thanks to Chris Quirk on the phones today. Enjoy the rest of your Monday.
Take control of buying tyres and arranging vehicle servicing when you visit tyres.im, where you can check out the wide price range, order your tyres online and book into Quayside Tyres for a fixed price or full warranty service. It's easy to book your slot at a time to suit from the comfort of your laptop or phone. And you can even spread the cost over 4 months interest-free. Find a wide range of services and book online now at tyres.im.
South Key Douglas, don't delay, have safer tyres today. Quayside!